Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it's polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression as far as the piano is concerned. I play with sentiment, for it is my forte. I keep it science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got those cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne were having been entered as consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us as a good example, then what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Ah, how are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Oh, eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. So where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do up there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Just neighbors.
Got nice neighbors up in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid, never speak to one of them.
Well, how immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Huh? Oh, Shropshire, yes, of course. Oh, hello, why all these cups? Why, cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Ah, Millie, Aunt Augusta, and Gwendolyn.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. But I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted, one usually is, I believe, and then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, my dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are made specially for Aunt Augusta.
You've been eating them all the time.
Well, that is quite a different matter. Why don't you have some bread and butter? The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is very devoted to bread and butter.
Well, very good bread and butter it is, too.
Oh, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone with the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? Well, I wish to goodness you had let me know. I had been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now the thing is found.
Well, I think it is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. But, however, it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
No. Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too, lives at the Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to Millie.
No. But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some ants are tall, some ants are not tall. That is surely a matter an ant may be able to decide for herself. You seem to think that every ant should be exactly like your ant, and that is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
No, yes. But why does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make it out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
What? You had always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It is perfectly absurd that you are saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your business cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany, W. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name's Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives at Turnbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is a very vulgar thing to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Fine. Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in a position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to one's health or one's happiness. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. And modern literature? A complete impossibility.
That would not at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. In fact, you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. Indeed, if it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Yeah, I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no women at all, or 2. And in the third place, I know perfectly well who she will sit me next to tonight. She will sit me next to Marry Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's like cleaning one's own linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cicely is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So, I am going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same, with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me very problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I have ever seen in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the past 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives, or creditors, ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so I can have an opportunity to let you propose to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry for a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger, and now I'll have that cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially!
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
Really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color from what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment. But the fact is, just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again, and they seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from fiercely bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. The shilly-shallying you question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of that modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice. As far as any improvement in his ailment goes, I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. You see, it is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta. Well, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is of a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out for you if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Shall we, Aunt Augusta?
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I have met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits. I am told, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately!
Darling, you have no idea how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else. I mean, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name really suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I just think there are a lot of much nicer names. I think, I don't know, off the top of my head, Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack. No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill, it produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only real safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married! Mr. Worthing!
Oh, surely, I mean, you know that I love you, and you have led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it'd be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you frankly beforehand that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
Oh, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little practice on how to propose.
My own one, I have never loved anyone in this world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. Oh, they are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama! I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making this inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn? Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mama!
Take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
Well, I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We see you work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Mm, do you smoke?
Yes, I must admit, I smoke.
Mm, I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many ideal men in London as it is. Yeah, how old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. You see, ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7 and 8,000 a year.
And would that be in land or in investments?
Investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. Well, between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Oh, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres. But I no, I don't depend on that for my real income. And as far as I can tell, the poachers are the only ones who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. You see, a girl with a simple and spoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Huh. Lady Bloxham. Don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in her years.
Ah. Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. And what number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Fashionable side. I thought there was something, however, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. Stay dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? Well, he was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost both my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found.
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Mm. And where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
I'm sorry, a handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. And an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
That line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for particular locality in which the handbag was found, you see, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for the purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask you then, what would you advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I can possibly manage to do that. I can produce a handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a Purcell? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning.
Da 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 da.
Don't play that ghastly tune! How idiotic are you, Algie?
Oh, didn't it go all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? Actually, I know it is the way she is. She is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never have I met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is, but I am quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster, without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I'm sorry, Algie, I suppose I shouldn't be talking about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Oh, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. Oh, gosh, you don't think there's a chance of Gwendolyn becoming anything like her mother in about 150 years or something, do you, Algie?
So all women become like their mothers. That is the tragedy. And no man ever does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in modern civilized life and society should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. Wish to goodness we still had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
Fools? Oh, about clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing that one tells to a sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her. Well, if she is pretty. And to make love to someone else, if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
And what about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. I don't know. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes. But it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say... a severe chill.
And you are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest carried off suddenly in Paris by severe chill. Oh no. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest.
Oh,
Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
that is quite all right. Cicely is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
Well, I would rather love to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She is excessively pretty and only 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty ward who is just only 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything that half an hour after they meet, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of things first. Now, my dear fellow, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we must really go and dress. Ah, did you know that it is nearly 7?
It's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
Oh, no, I hate talking.
Well, maybe we might trot around the Empire at 10.
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
What shall we do?
Nothing!
It is awfully hard work doing nothing at all. However, I don't mind a little hard work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Ah, Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly moral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do so yet.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mama, I lost it at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address in the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration, but I will communicate with you daily.
And one
How long do you remain in town?
till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Thank you, but I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out to her carriage.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
And I shall probably not be back until Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all my Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Ah, Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to provide satisfaction, sir.
There is a perfect, intellectual, sensible girl. The only girl I will ever care for in my entire... What on earth are you so amused at? Not that funny.
I'm just a little anxious about Bunbury, that's all.
If you aren't careful, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You were never talking anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Simply. Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology, and such things can influence a man very much.
I don't think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly happen. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
You did? How clever you are, Miss Prism. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the garden, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson when the doctor came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Ahem! Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria. My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter in the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought up his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, Cousin Ernest. My wicked Cousin Ernest.
I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Ooh, of course I have rather been reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you've mentioned the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been quite pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
It is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life, but I do think you should wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly won't let Jack buy my outfit. Indeed, he has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I am afraid I am not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you remind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will, and I feel better already.
Looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. But might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marischal meal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
'Cause you're looking like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says any such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I've ever seen.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I don't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope? Never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so nostalgic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I had expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
It's my brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
My brother is dead.
Your brother Ernest, dead.
Quite dead.
I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Oh, poor Ernest. He was a man of many faults, but it is still a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I received a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel yesterday.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to draughts. Will the intimate take place here?
No, he seems to express a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, you said that you perform christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right? I mean, of course you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject. but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother, I believe, he was unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children, but no. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already?
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. But of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any kind of way, or if you think I'm a little too old now, or...
Not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
The immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, and indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony be performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 or so, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that same time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
No. I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would just be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I shall not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I ask you would merely not be too much bowed down by grief, as what seem to us as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes have you got on? Do go and change them.
Hopefully.
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do you look happy? You look as if you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother? Ernest? He arrived about half an hour ago.
That's absurd. I don't have a brother.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother, and you couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his son in return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. Well, I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd. Good heavens.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be some good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes! He has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury! Well, I won't have him talk to you about the Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I do admit that the faults were all on my side. But I must say, I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially since it is the first time I have come down here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never! Never! Never!
Well, then, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel Algie, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I won't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir? I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
Well, I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
Dare you, my duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
And I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you for a week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a week as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it would be very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
What? I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her again before I go, and make plans for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
Going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but Even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
You can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But do go on. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come back around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Oh, well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is very much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree. The next day I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It is very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember all too well how I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement was so beautiful and so badly spelled that I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I felt it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling. But it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
Well, my dear child, do you mean to say that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name, like... Algernon, for instance?
But I don't like the name Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily! Cecily, your rector here, I suppose, is thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes, Dr. Chasuble is the most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on the most important on the most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must write his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Oh, Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then it is quite settled then, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for me mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to be the proper sphere for the man, and certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system, so do you mind me looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here as well.
Oh, no, I've no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Withing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you, but I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but expressing a wish that you were well. Just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with the most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn, did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it, and now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful for most men. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make it a secret to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I'm afraid there must be some misconception. My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be mistaken. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if this is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it had caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, I'm afraid he has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglements my dear boy has got into. I will never reproach him with it once we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, Miss Fairfax. From one at the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I'm sure that's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just as present. In fact, it is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. Miss Fairfax, may I offer you some tea?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. Oh, no, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
And that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake! I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far!
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful, and I am never deceived in such manners. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
Please, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! Oh, my own Ernest!
Gwendolyn, my darling.
A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
What? To dear little Cecily? What? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who's now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh,
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily!
We wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
Oh,
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily. It is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It's the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None?
Has you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bun burying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is. The most wonderful bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you are serious about? I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algie. And a very good thing, too.
And your brother is a little off-color too, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing, either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
And I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
But I simply wanted to be engaged to Cicely. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
And I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's a very vulgar thing to talk about one's own business. Only stockbrokers do that. And merely at dinner parties.
How? How can you just sit there, calmly eating muffins, while we are in this horrible trouble? I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get all over my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, the eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
There's no reason why you should get to eat them all in that way.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
Because that is perfectly heartless of you to eat at all under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It is absurd. I never go without having my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
Oh, my dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I, naturally, will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. And we can't both be christened Ernest, it would just be absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I want. There's no evidence I've ever been christened by anybody. I think it is extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been Christian for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That's the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your having been Christianed, I must say I think it is rather dangerous that you are venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. And might I remind you that you have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris by a severe chill?
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be. I know. But I dare say it now. Science is always making wonderful improvements on things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You're never talking anything but nonsense.
Jack, you are eating the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there is still 1 muffin left.